So, I was on Twitter the other day, and there was this very famous photographer, I'm not gonna say his name, but below there was a bunch of aspiring photographers, and they were arguing about him. They're complaining like, he won't tell me his settings, he won't tell me his camera or his lens, blah, blah, blah. And it was pretty much like an echo chamber. Like all the other aspiring photographers were telling him, oh, it's because he doesn't want you to know his secrets, he doesn't want your pictures to be as good as him, he doesn't want you to be as famous as him, blah, blah, blah. Basically, everyone, it really gave me an insight of how the newbie, how the beginner thinks, you know, like I went in there, gave my 2 cents, and I was basically telling them, look, the reason he doesn't give you his settings is because he knows that you can't just copy and paste a photographer's settings and expect it to get the same picture. You know, it doesn't work like that. It matters a lot, like how much ambient lighting there is, and you want motion blur or not. And it also matters like which lens you're using, which camera you're using, and so on, you know. But they weren't having any of that. And then I try to explain, and the reason he's not telling you his camera is simply because he doesn't want you to go out there and spend thousands of dollars on the same camera, knowing very well that you probably won't be able to take as good pictures as him. And then you kind of feel cheated because you bought all this expensive gear and your pictures look nothing like his, you know. But they just completely ignored me and kept on arguing like, oh, he just wants to keep all the secrets to himself, you know. And I wanted to make this video because on a daily basis I get at least 7 people asking me, what are your camera settings, or what camera do you use, what lens do you use, blah, blah. And that's really the wrong question to be asking. I'm a firm believer that you can use any camera, yes, any camera, and you can take nice photos. I mean, you think back to like the pros back in the day, like they had really shitty old film cameras with lenses that were not even close to being as sharp as what we have now, you know. And they were able to take amazing images because it's the photographer that matters. Anyways, I'm going to show you guys all the gear that I use to take my pictures, because I know people still want to know, but please don't feel compelled to go and buy out all this gear. This is just things that I've amassed over the years. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is a tripod. Now, this is a Gitzo Traveler. It costs like around 800 bucks. And don't feel compelled to buy an $800 tripod. The reason I got this tripod is because I wanted one that was going to last a long time. I've had many tripods in the past and they all kind of broke eventually, and one of them even had the tripod head fall off a bridge. Luckily my camera was not attached. But this was a good investment. It served me well. It's light, and first, I don't use this tripod when I take my street photos. I know you guys are probably wondering that because that's what I'm known for. I mostly use this when I do landscapes, time-lapse, and if for some reason I want to do like kind of slow motion blur or something, then I will use a tripod. Or if I'm going to be in a spot like doing street photography and I know I'm going to be there a long time waiting for the right moment for the right person, and I don't want to be holding the camera the whole time, then I will use a tripod. But besides that, when I take my pictures, I just pretty much run and gun. But yeah, every photographer should have a tripod regardless. Actually, I have 2 because I'm also the one holding this camera right now. But that's besides the point. Anyways, a good tripod. So one of the things that really doesn't get talked about is kind of a straps. Like this is my R rocket strap. You can Google it yourself. But anyways, this just goes around my shoulder like this, and it attaches to the camera. I don't have to worry about dropping my camera. It's kind of pricey, but I've had this for years and it served me really well, so I'm still using this, no problem. But yeah, if you've never used a strap, I highly recommend it. It's great. And another thing that I like to use is this is a portable light. I like to use this sometimes when it's like too dark. And I think light is, in most cases, more important than your camera, because as long as you have good light, you don't really need a good camera. I mean, you can use your phone most of the time, but if you have good lighting, you can't tell the difference between a good camera and a professional camera, you know, unless you're looking for the bokeh or something like that. But yeah, I have a portable light. I also have these newer gels that I like to use the light. That way I can make kind of colors in the alley or something, like all kinds of colors. You know, I liked the red, the blues, and the purples the most, of course. And also, if you guys watch my videos, I do a lot of landscapes, which involves climbing mountains like at 3 a.m. And I like to use this little headlamp. It just goes on your head like so, like that. Anyways, it's pretty cool. Costs like 10 bucks, but this is part of my landscape stuff. You know, since we are talking about lighting, I want to talk about something that I don't usually mention, but this is my flash, the Noealz YN560 Mark IV. I mainly use this when I'm photographing either the rain or the snow. Like sometimes people wonder how you get the snow or the rain visible in your photos, you know? And the answer is to use the flash. But yeah, mainly I use it for that. I'm not a portraits person, so I don't go around taking portraits of people. Sometimes I like to bounce the flash with like color gels. That way I can like make color in the background. Sometimes, not always. But yeah, I like to use this. And also, one thing I don't also mention is I have these colored gels, but these are for my lenses, you know. For example, blue. Like sometimes when I'm live streaming or I'm taking pictures with my phone, I like to use these. Occasionally I will use them with my camera, but for the most part you can just do it in Lightroom, I figured. But for things you can do like video, like my Instagram stories, I like to use these gels and it makes everything a nice different color. These are very cheap. These are like 30 bucks. You can find them on Amazon. Google it. You don't have to ask me. Yeah, pretty good stuff. Speaking of filters, I have here a whole ton of filters, and I have more than just one size because actually I have different lenses, but I'm just going to talk about specific types of filters that I have. First of all, I have the Hoya R72 infrared filter. This is how I took infrared pictures before I got an infrared camera. And you can find it on Amazon, you can find B&H, or just Google it, you know. I know I'm gonna get somebody asking me where to find it, just Google. Next, you guys know I make a lot of video. This is a white balance disc. Basically, I just take a picture with this, and then I set my camera as white balance. So for pictures, it doesn't really matter so much, but for video, it's easier when you set your white balance this way. Next, this is a specialized filter, really expensive, costs about $300 or so, maybe $400. It's the Stingray Gold and Blue filter. Now you might be thinking that I probably use this for street photos, and I don't. This is more of my landscape photography gear. Like sometimes I'll show up to a location and it's like really overcast and cloudy and there's like no color in the sky, it looks really dull. But this accentuates the golds and the blues, and it makes me come back with a real nice looking picture. So this saves my ass a lot, and it's always in my bag if I'm taking landscape photos. This is an ND filter, 10 stops for extremely long exposure. Also very expensive. You can buy them in varying degrees. I usually use this when I'm doing kind of time-lapse in the daytime. Not so much at night, because at night it's already pretty dark for the most part. This is a polarizing filter. Usually I use this when I'm taking pictures of nature, you know, like the grass or the leaves, especially now in autumn. This makes the colors really pop. And if you know how to use this correctly, when the sun is like at 90 degrees in the sky, it makes the reflections kind of disappear, you know. It just leaves the color and you don't get all that glare from the sun. It also makes the sky kind of bluer, darker bluer. So Definitely very important if you do a lot of nature photography. And I have this is called a fader ND. It's a variable ND filter. This is mostly for video because, you know, I do a lot of video. This just helps me change how dark the ND filter is. So don't feel obligated to buy this or any of this stuff. This is just what I use, okay? Oh, and of course we have a regular ND filter. We have the filter holder. And again, this is mostly like landscape stuff. Like, you don't really have to worry about this so much. It just makes the top part of the photo darker. For example, when there's like a sunrise or sunset or something, that's always good. Then we start to get into the more expensive filters, specialized filters that you guys don't need. This is the Photodex Wonder Pana ND filter. It's a ND 1000, and this filter works on here it is. Extremely big, extremely dark. This is for my Nikon 14-24 lens. It's my widest lens, and I also use it mostly for landscape pictures because I do a lot of time lapse. And regular ND filter doesn't fit. That's why I use this filter. Besides having a ND 1000 filter, I also have a reverse gradient ND filter for the 14-24 lens. This is the Lucrat 165 System Pro. Extremely expensive, by the way. Again, you don't need this. And I also have the Lucrat System reverse gradient ND filter for lenses 77 millimeters and above. And what this does, basically, it's for sunrises and sunsets. So specifically for sunrises and sunsets. See this? When the sun is setting or rising, the middle of your camera or the middle of the lens is always going to be very bright. And what this does is it leaves the bottom clear, it's dark in the middle, and it gets brighter as it goes to the top. That way you can have a very nice sunrise and sunset without any problems. Very expensive, very specialized. Believe me, you don't need it. And if you are looking for to buy it for some reason, you can Google it. Okay, so we talked about the filters. I also have a whole ton of adapters, and if you don't know what an adapter is, basically they just let you put different sized lenses on different cameras. So I have a Nikon 14-24 lens. It's huge, but I like to put that on my other camera, which is not Nikon, which I will tell you about later. And I also have a bunch of Pentax lenses and Fujifilm cameras. And basically this just lets me put those lenses on those cameras. So it's much cheaper than buying a new camera, believe me. Okay, so now we can start getting to the more fun stuff, which is which camera do I use? Because after all, that's why most people watch this video or watching this video, right? And actually, I once told like this group of people my gear, and I just got basically insulted. They said, wow, you're crazy. Like, he can't buy all that gear to take the pictures that you do. And I responded, you know, you're missing the entire point. The point is that you can use any camera to take the pictures that I take. And the first camera I'm gonna talk to you about that I use the most is actually my phone. Now this is the iPhone 7. It's pretty new, but actually I've been taking photos. I just recently got this camera. I've been using my iPhone 5 for a long time, and no one's really noticed the difference in pictures between the iPhone 5 and the iPhone 7. So the iPhone 5 came out in 2012. I mean, that's five years ago, 6 years ago. Yeah, that was 6 years ago. I've been taking pictures with my iPhone 5 for 6 years. Nobody noticed. No, not even when I switched to the iPhone 7. So whenever people come up to me and say, oh, you take nice pictures with your phone because you have a new nice phone, that's bullshit. You can take nice pictures given that there is good light. One of my favorite film cameras that I like to use is the Pentax K1000. I like it because it's so simple, like it's so basic. So many like beginner photographers start with this camera, and I just love the way it is, and I just love the simplicity of it. I have so many lenses for Pentax. This is the Zoom Master 35 to 70 millimeter, and I don't know, I love this camera. This is the camera I use to make film photography at night video, and it's just so simple. Like, you have no excuse for not taking nice photos, because I'm using like one of the oldest, cheapest cameras to take good pictures, right? I can guarantee you whatever camera you have right now is better than this one. So no excuses. And when I don't want to be full manual, but I still want to be kind of manual, and I just want to really slow down, this is the Pentax ME Super. I don't want to say it's the same thing. It just has an aperture priority mode. So if I want to shoot film, but I don't want to shoot completely full manual, I just want to let the camera do a little bit of work, then I use the Pentax ME Super. Very nice. And this is the 28mm 2.8. By the way, these old lenses, you can find them on eBay so cheap, and you can just adapt them to any of the cameras you have now, and you don't have to worry about spending thousands or hundreds on super expensive autofocus lenses. These lenses are great and super sharp. So one of the other cameras that I like to use is the Fuji X Pro 2. That's also a very old camera, but it's also one of my favorites because it's so compact and the lens is Pancake. You guys saw my old video on my camera settings, and actually that's the camera I'm using right now to record, so I can't show you here. But I really love that camera when I just traveling, because it's so compact, it's really powerful. And yeah, it's really old, but no one's ever noticed that it's old, right? Because it doesn't really matter. But yeah, that's a great camera. My only concern with it is that the autofocus is a little slow at night, but honestly, it doesn't really matter so much to me because I still get the pictures. And recently, I bought the Fuji X Pro 2. So I decided that I love Fuji so much that I wanted to invest in a new system, but I don't want to spend so much money buying their lenses because the lenses are kind of expensive. But anyways, I just love this camera, and this is the camera that I use the most because one, it's portable. Two, I love the viewfinder. I mean, Fuji viewfinders are just beautiful. And I just love the way the shutter feels. And yeah, so basically, I love Fuji very much, and this is the camera that I love the most. And right now I'm using a Pentax lens, Super Takumar 50-1.4. This is what they call the radioactive lens because it's got thorium built in the back. And I'm using a K&F Concept adapter so I can put the Pentax lens on here. So yeah, this is a fully manual lens, buttery soft. And am I using it for any special reason? Not really. I pretty much use all my film lenses on this camera, but this is the one I like the most because it's just so, it feels so nice, right? So I know some of you beginner photographers won't understand that, like, oh, what, it just feels so nice, there's no special reason. Is it because it shoots 1.4? The answer is no. I just like the way it feels and the way it looks, and that's what I'm using. All right, the next camera I have is the Canon M2. I got this on eBay, but it's just a regular camera. I like it because you can change lenses. So like, people are always asking me, which camera should I get? And I say anything that shoots raw and you can change lenses. But anyways, I got the Canon M2. Actually, this is my modified infrared camera. People always seem to think that you can buy an infrared lens or an infrared camera and it has to be a specific kind. It doesn't. You can modify any camera to shoot infrared. Yeah, I got this one on eBay, so it's already modified, but there's services online like LivePixel that you can just pay and they'll change your cameras. Well, they don't change your camera sensor, they just change the hot mirror in front of it so that you can shoot infrared. So if you've seen my infrared pictures, they're coming from this camera or any other camera with the Hoya R72 filter, but most of the time it's with this one. I'm going to make a separate video talking just about infrared cameras because that's like something a lot of people look to me for. But yeah, this is the camera. It can be any camera, okay? And you can find one on eBay or you can have it modified yourself. Don't think it has to be this specific camera, all right? Or the specific lens. But yeah, this is the Canon 22mm f2 Pancake lens. It's the standard lens that comes with this camera. But I like to use my adapters and put different lenses of it at different sizes. So that's the reason I like the Canon M2, even though there's newer ones. So I mentioned that I like to use my Fuji X100 to take night pictures, and sometimes, most of the time I like to use the Fuji X Pro 2 just because it feels so nice. But the thing with them is you can't really use them in the rain. They're not weather sealed. So when I shoot in the rain, I like to bring out the big camera. This is the Canon 5D Mark III. It also came out like in 2012. So this is a really old camera and I can take really good pictures with it. So I don't really see the need to upgrade to a 5D Mark IV or the Sony AR7 II or whatever. As you can see, my cameras are really old, but I can still take nice pictures, and I was doing it with an iPhone 5 too. So I always tell people that I think any camera after like 2011 is really good, so it doesn't really matter so much. It's just small incremental changes. This camera, I like to use it when it rains and it snows, and it's usually what I use when I do time-lapse photography, so for my landscape pictures. Yeah, it's got a nice big battery, but it's really big and chunky, so I usually use the Fuji, right? So yeah, 5D Mark III. So besides the Canon 5D Mark III, I also have here a Canon 100D. Now the other one's full frame, not that it matters. This one is crop, but I like to use this camera when I'm out shooting with the 5D Mark III. For example, when I go take landscape pictures and I have my 5D Mark III on a tripod and I can't move it because I'm doing a time lapse, then I'll take out my trusty 100D and I'll just take different pictures, different compositions, framing. I can zoom in and out without worrying about bothering my time lapse, because you go somewhere and you do a time lapse, you can't really move the camera. So that's why I have this, and it's also nice. Just nice and portable. You know, I like using this one. It's small and unobtrusive. It's very light, and it's only like 300 bucks. So yeah, people recommend which camera to get. If you want a DSLR, this is a very nice entry-level DSLR. But if you're a good enough photographer, people aren't gonna tell the difference if you're like beginner or not. You know, this is a good camera. So now that we've talked about the cameras, we can start talking about the lenses. Now, I happen to love film lenses. You know, they're really old, they have some kind of character, they're cheap, and you can adapt them to almost any camera. Yes, it means you have to focus manually, but that doesn't really bother me, even though sometimes I miss the focus. It's fine. I enjoy them, and people can't really tell the difference when I shoot with them, except when I use some very specialized lenses. So here are the lenses I use. First of all, we have a Pentax 50 1.4, very standard lens. It came with my Pentax K1000. As you probably saw, I changed the Fuji lens to a Super Takuma 1.4. It's not that much different from this lens. I mean, it's pretty much the same, but it adds kind of a glow to the photos. I can't really explain it, but if I want to use my film camera, I sometimes switch between this lens and the 35 to 70 Zoom Master, right? Here is another 28 2.8. The Super ME has one already. This one is kind of old and cracked, so I had to buy a new one. But it wasn't that much, so that's one film lens, very old. Here we have another Pentax 50 1.4. They're so ubiquitous. You know, this is from another Pentax camera I used to have, but they're cheap, so no problem. So that's like 350s I have already. And here is one of my favorite lenses when I do have to take portraits, even though I'm not really good at them. This is the Pentax 200mm 4.0, and it's really beautiful and the closest thing I have to a lens for shooting models. And I just really enjoy shooting with it, you know. And all these lenses are really cheap. You can find them on eBay if you can't afford a really expensive lens. This is what I would go for. The next lens is actually it's a very specialized lens. This is the Russian Zenitar 1.5, well, 85mm 1.5, and if you've been around in photography long enough, you've probably heard of this lens. It's very famous for its kind of swirly bokeh and unique in that regard. It's really heavy, and I'm pretty sure you could kill someone if you drop this on them. But when you take a picture with this lens, you get this very kind of swirly bokeh effect in the background. It's really beautiful. And the great thing about this lens is you can get it on eBay for like 300 bucks from the Russian Federation. But the only complaint I have on this lens, if it is a complaint, is that it's just so soft. It's so hard to get a sharp picture with this lens. But if you use this lens, you're not getting it for the sharpness, you're getting it for its artistic purpose, which is the swirly bokeh. So I love shooting this lens, especially right now since it's autumn. You get lots of wonderful colors, but it's definitely not for everybody. So now we can start getting into the more the good stuff, the more expensive lenses that I have. First, I have my fisheye. This is the Samyang 12mm 2.8, and some people think you only need this for fisheye effects, but actually I like using this as a wide-angle lens as long as it's very steady with the horizon, because I don't always want to carry a very bokeh heavy wide-angle lens, and this is really compact and really light. So when I travel, I like to use this lens, and it's only like 300 bucks. Again, you can find it on Google or Amazon. Then I have the much more expensive but legendary Nikon 14 to 24mm. So this lens is huge, and as you can tell, you can't really put normal filters on this lens. That's why I have the specialized Lucrat system and photodiox filters. So I mostly use this for landscape pictures. It's the widest lens you can get. Well, it was the widest lens you can get. I think you can now get the Canon 11 to 14 or something like that. It's really expensive, but this lens is like one of the best. All the lines come out straight, and it's just so sharp. And it's only for Nikon, but I have a photodiox adapter, so I can put it on my Canon camera. So this is my landscape lens. It also has to be shot manually since it's using an adapter. These are my two zoom lenses. First, we have the 24 to 105 with image stabilizer. This lens is the one I use most of the time because it has such a nice variety. Like sometimes they want to go wide, sometimes they will want to go wide, or if I want to like zoom in, this lens is perfect for that. It's f4, so people are surprised that you like to use an f4 in the dark, but like I said, it has IS, so it doesn't really bother me that much. People ask, how do I take such sharp pictures in the dark? And you just have to hold that camera steady, really. Anyways, if I use the Canon 5D Mark III, that's the lens I like to use. This is the 70-200 f4. I mostly use this for like events or landscapes. This one doesn't have IS, but that's because most of the time I don't use this lens. So when I was buying a 70-200, I was wondering, should I get the one with IS or without? And ultimately, this one is cheaper, and like I said, I don't use it that much, just sometimes. And when I do use it, I use a tripod, so works just fine. And now we have my fast primes. Now you guys know me for my street photography, especially at night. But you'll be surprised to know that I don't actually use these very much. Like, these are my fastest lenses. This is the Canon 24mm 1.4. This is the first L lens I ever bought. And this is the 50mm 1.2. You might think I use this a lot, but I almost never use them for street photography. First of all, the 51.2 is extremely slow. Like, you can hear the glass moving when you focus with this. And this one, although I do like to shoot wide, I just don't use it that much for whatever reason. I prefer having the zoom 24-105 because you never know when you need to zoom in or when you don't, or where you're gonna reach someone in time or not. So I usually use these when I'm shooting events, like at a wedding or some kind of concert or something. It might sound strange, I don't use them that much, but that's what I use them. These are mostly for work, not so much for my street photography. Surprise. One of the things I did forget to talk about are these specialized filters. These are my infrared filters. Like before, I used to have a fully infrared camera. It was my Canon M2, but it was modified at 590 millimeters. Okay, so that's like the wavelength, and it was only that wavelength. Now my camera is a full spectrum camera. I had it modified again, and these filters, they just change the wavelength. So now I can change different colors based on the filter. Now you can't take these filters and put them on your lens and expect the same results. Okay, these are specifically designed for full spectrum cameras. So I have them of various lengths. So I have 77 millimeters, and I have some for my smaller Pancake lenses. See, they're still in the wrapping and everything. But I like using this lens on the infrared camera too. That's why I have the lenses here. When you look at them, they look like different colors. Like this one's kind of yellow. I had a viewer who put like a yellow filter on his camera, and he was like, my infrared pictures don't look anything like yours. And that's because just because it's yellow doesn't mean it's an infrared filter, you know. These are specialized filters for full spectrum cameras. But anyways, that's all my gear. And if you're taking anything from this video, it's just that there is no one camera or one lens to do what I do. I use everything. I use all my cameras, I use all my lenses, I use all my gear. I use a flash with gels, I use camera without the flash, I use filters in front of the lens, I don't use filters in front of the lens, I use wide angle lenses, I don't use wide angle lenses, I use fast primes, I don't use fast primes, I use zooms. So I use anything with me, and the most important thing, the constant, is that I'm the photographer. So whatever is behind the camera, which is me, is more important than what the camera I'm using. And like I said, don't think you need to buy all this gear to do what I do. Like the group of people I was arguing with, they think I can't buy all this gear just to be like you. Like, you don't. The point is, you can use any camera. Of course, if you're professional, you're gonna be a little bit more specialized, and your gear's might be a little bit more important depending on what you're doing. But for the most of you guys out there watching this, it doesn't really matter. So go out there and shoot, and I hope you learned something from this video, that gear isn't really important. I mean, it kind of is depending on what you're doing, more so in landscapes, but when you're just out shooting in the streets, it doesn't really matter so much. I use an f4, and you don't need a fast prime. It might help, but I don't use them that often. So anyways, I'll see you around, and I hope you guys don't take my tone in this video as being kind of condescending or angry, even though I'm a little bit angry because I'm sick of getting this question. But I hope this will answer your questions. So See you around.